Writer's Dream. This is another episode where we talk to authors about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can find us on Facebook. Just look for The Writer's Dream. We are on YouTube, but on YouTube it's a little bit more complicated. You have to look for me. And I'm Linda Maria Frank, and I have written the Annie Tillery Mystery series. So put my name in the search bar, my picture will come up, click on the picture, and there are about 200 interviews in there. So if you are interested in reading or writing, you'll get some very interesting information from YouTube. And I also put the show on Cablevision. It's on channel 115 at 2:30 on Thursday afternoon. So we repeat the episodes. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our guest today, Geoffrey Wells. Geoffrey is a repeat offender, as I like to call them. These are people who've been on before, because Geoffrey is becoming a prolific writer. His first endeavor was actually a trilogy called the Freedom Trilogy, and it included 3 books, an eco-thriller, The Drowning Bay, Alone in the Ivory Cloud, which was about the ivory trade, and A Photo for the River, which was about searching for freedom in Mozambique. He had a career in IT, and he wrote he produced an animated film with his wife, Cynthia, which won 5 awards, and also an award-winning children's book, Moonglow. So, Geoffrey, you've been busy. Today's book, though, is something very close to my heart, and that is Neverless. And Neverless is hopefully showing up on your screen, not reversed. But at any rate, this is a young adult book, and it has wonderful plot, characters, and setting. So those are the 3 elements we always talk about, Geoffrey. So give me a summary of the book.
Nevertheless is about Pablo and Mindy, who are soccer buddies, who stumble on a prohibition tunnel, which leads to a mill, which is now being used to smuggle in opioids into Long Island. And Pablo is a dreamer kid, and he has his own father issues. Mindy's father, it turns out, is a doctor who has fallen into addiction. And they decide that because they are both underage, obviously, they're 12-year-olds, they need to try and stop this flow of drugs. And so they set about helping each other's family, particularly their dads. And that's really what the story's about.
Yeah, I thought the idea that both of them were trying to help each other's fathers or their own fathers was a very nice adjunct to the plot. The plot's exciting. I mean, it really moves along. You use the setting of Long Island, and are these places that you know about?
Yeah, the mill is a grist mill on Mattatuck Creek or inlet. It was used during Prohibition to smuggle in what they called hooch, and has a very interesting history. It was one of the hot spots during the 1920s, so it was a speakeasy, but it has fallen to disuse and is now abandoned. The property has been bought, but I thought, what a great setting for this mystery to take place, because it's the perfect place for an underground secretive drug gang to bring their drugs in via the ocean and therefore avoid detection on the freeways and the roads.
Yeah, I don't think that people in general are aware of how much Long Island was involved in all kinds of smuggling from
Absolutely.
the very early colonial days. Just for instance, Fire Island, the fact that there's a bay and that they can come through the inlets and be in calm water. And then, of course, the South Shore of Long Island is noted for all of those creeks and inlets and whatnot where smuggling took place. And now, of course, it isn't alcohol. It isn't scotch. It's drugs.
drugs.
And I know I had a sailboat at one time, and we were sailing past the Coast Guard station at Montauk Point, and there were a bunch of fishing boats in the marina. And I thought to myself, I said to my husband at the time, I said, why are there fishing boats in the marina at the Gulf at the Coast Guard? And he said they're boats that have been confiscated because the fishing boats were used to bring drugs in.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very interesting aspect of Long Island, and of course the beauty of the seashore of Long Island, and you bring that in quite nicely as well. So tell me about Mindy and Pablo. Are these people based on, because you really have a good grasp. I taught for years. You have a good grasp of kids at that age. So are these children you know?
Indirectly, it's not my own kids and not even friends' kids, but I did my previous children's book with Peggy Dickerson, who has grandkids that age. And I looked at them and I listened to them, and certainly both of them are somewhat modeled on their characters. Um, and that's about as far as it went. A lot of the input I got was from my developmental editor, who is a very experienced middle grade um, author and also runs writers' workshops and that sort of thing on that genre. And she gave me a great guidance. So I owe a lot to her.
Okay, so did you, when you switched genre to into young adult, um, what was your motivation for that altruistic, or was it because I don't know how to say this politely. You think that that's a better sell?
Definitely wasn't the latter.
Okay.
Because I knew going in that I knew nothing about selling into the middle grade market. So I regard it as a middle grade thriller. It's I think a little old for to call it YA young adult, but nevertheless, the reason I wrote it was because I think of my writing as writing thrillers for any age. The principles of a thriller would apply to 10-year-olds as it would for 60-year-olds readers. And
Mhm.
I thought this is such an interesting subject. And in fact, my first few drafts were not from the point of view of the kids. They were I had 3 points of view in this book currently, or rather in this book. There are 2 points of view, Mindy and Pablo. But in the other book, the octogenarian mentor had his own point of view, and I spoke from that voice. And in fact, I was writing it for adults in my first few drafts. And the developmental editor said to me, you got to decide where this book lies. And I would strongly advise you to make it from the point of view of the kids. And I did that. It was somewhat of a rewrite, but I was able to keep a lot of the context of the mentor, so I didn't feel like I lost too much.
Now, I think that sometimes we think that kids who are teenagers are really not able to handle certain material, but in the world they live in, they're exposed to everything.
So much.
Um, I mean, I can remember a friend of mine being very upset at some language that some adults were using in a party. And I just looked at her and I said, what do you think he hears in school?
Yeah.
So,
It's,
I mean, they are exposed to a lot more than certainly we were when we were young. But, uh, and what I liked about the book was you really had a delicate balance of using language that would appeal to young adults without going into a lot of slang, which would date the book, Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. When you write young adult and children's books, you have to be careful not to date it because there are generations and generations and generations who will read this book.
yeah,
And in some ways, dating the book is because you want to just capture that time period. But in this book, you really had that nice balance of not overdoing the teenage thing.
thank you.
And I loved that you brought in DACA, the Dreamers. I really, that's one of my favorite, things that I would like to see settled at one time. Living on Long Island, you come across so many Hispanic people in so
Yeah,
many ways and professions and whatnot, and I would really like to see them get some peace.
absolutely. The
Yeah. So let's get into the weeds of writing. What makes a writer? What makes you write? I know it's a hard question.
it's really becomes habitual after a while. It's something that the story is what drives everything. The need to the need to materialize a story in the form of the written word. And when it starts out, it's not the written word; it's a vague idea, and to hone it down into um, chapters and paragraphs and sentences is part of the fun of it, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and you begin to get addicted to the story, and you want to finish it. It becomes compelling, and it drives you forward to continue writing.
Yeah. Yeah, I started writing because somebody told me I was a good storyteller. And so,
Story, it's all about story, isn't it?
yeah, well, it is. But and I had stories because I would write stories for my forensics classes. I would write little detective stories, and they'd have to solve them using forensic science instead of saying read chapter 6 on fingerprints and summarize it.
That's fun.
Include fingerprints in a
Great fun.
story. And so they told me I was a good storyteller and I love Nancy Drew. So I said, I have some really good stories here. So that's what made me write. And then as you're writing, other ideas come to you. Like, for instance, in your book, you wanted to tell kids about dreamers and opioid addiction. And I had things I wanted to tell kids about as well. So, and I think, I use this line in my lectures that civilizations are defined by their stories.
Yeah,
So being a writer and a storyteller is pretty interesting.
yeah, it really is.
Now, you self-published?
I did.
You published this book yourself.
Yes.
Ah, the joys of self-publishing. So,
Yeah.
but you really come from a business where you probably know people in the business who can help you out. Am I right or am I wrong?
I wish you were right.
Ah, okay. Well,
I
join the
don't. I
club.
don't really know that many people. I mean, I have a network of associations and alliances and writers groups and that sort of thing. But you know, there's no motherly hand there guiding me through this process. You're on your own. You're
Well,
just
you pretty much, you had experience with other books too. And I liked self-publishing because I was in control of everything.
yeah.
And there have been times when I have come across people who've wanted to take my books and publish them. I don't want them to. I like having control of them. But it is a lot of work. What have you done so far to get the story out there?
So my strategy, for what it's worth, was to publish the paperback first
Mhm.
and get that out there, so into people's hands, so that they can have a chance to read it, and then a little later publish the ebook. But when I did that, I determined that I needed to give away a certain amount of books to generate reviews.
Mm,
And so I used a service called Free Booksy, and 1,100 readers downloaded my book. within the first few days. Then I used another service, which is UK based, called Hello Books. And then I used Goodreads. And I have a Goodreads giveaway coming up.
Mhm.
It's in the process right now, and the final drawing will be on the 27th. And so far, there are about, I think, 469 readers who have put it onto their TBR list, their to be read list. And as you know, Goodreads, when you enter a giveaway, you get a notification, an email saying, please read the book and review it, which is great. So um, it's the long game. So there's no magic bullet as far as I know, unless you buy lists, which I don't believe in. I just think that's phony.
Did
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
so I'm giving readers the time to read the book and to review it. And of course, I remind them through my email list as well.
Um, have you thought about making the audiobook? I had much success with audiobooks.
I've thought about it. I haven't done anything about it because I'm hesitant to do it. But I'm very curious, and I definitely want to look into it.
Yeah, well, I believe that DLTV Studio does it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
because that's the whole thing is you need to get a person who has the correct equipment
right.
because the audiobook it's not like this where there can be background sound. There can't be any background sound. But
Yeah.
I had much better success with the audiobook than anything. So I would look into that.
Oh, that's great. Were you able to source the talent through that studio?
Well, when I did the first few audiobooks I did, in fact, the whole Annie Tillery mystery series I did on ACX. And
Hmm.
ACX, you download or I should say, upload to the site the manuscript, and then they have producers who bid on it, and then they will give you a sample, and if you like it, then you take it. So that's what I did, and it was all free, and that worked out very well. But Amazon has figured out that they're not making money on that, so you could still do it, but it isn't as good as it used to be. And then the last book, the Buccaneers book, which is a different series, I had done by Red Penguin, and I liked it because the girl who read was very young, and my kids in this book were very young, so I liked it very much. And it's fun because you get a chapter at a time to approve,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
listen to this book. It's like a really you love your book, you love your book like it's your baby, and so
Yeah.
you listen to this, and it's a really heartwarming experience. So I like that.
Did you find
Have
that you
you?
have to make a lot of corrections to the narration?
Yeah. And people said, "Aren't you going to do your own audiobook?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not 17 years old, and I don't sound like it." So, um, have you done libraries? You've got some good libraries out there.
Yeah, and I have a kind of a big event happening at the end of January
Good.
at the Cutchogue Library.
Let me
So
know.
what the children's librarian there has been terrific. She has put together a panel on harm reduction and addiction,
Uh-huh.
and has three specialists coming in to talk about that to a larger audience, and then I will also read my book at the same time. So that's going to be a nice event. And she was the one that found the people and invited them and got everything lined up. So she's been terrific.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know in an email when you're doing that, and I'd like to attend.
Oh, I'd
We'll
love you
do
to.
drive out to the East End.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll do
No,
that.
see if I can bring some friends. Um, what advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out and wants to write a book? Most people who say that they want to write a book have a story, so they have something they want to
They have
say.
something. Yeah, that's right. Um, well, the advice is kind of obvious. If you say you're going to write a book, you need to write a book. You write on that book almost every day. So don't think that you're going to write a book and you'll get to it this week and then let a few weeks go by and then you'll write a little bit more, because it'll never happen. Life gets in the way and it's just too easy to shelve it. But if you're serious, then give yourself the opportunity to at least produce the first draft. And as many writers say, including Toni Morrison, who I think said, you got to get the first shitty draft out. That's what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the core piece of advice. By doing that, you will realize where your shortcomings are with regard to craft, your command of the language, the research you need to do, and all the rest of it will be obvious to you. So I think that's what needs to be done for the starting out writer who's just never taken on something like this. That's what you got to do.
So, in other words, it's like 3 words: just write it
Just write
and
it.
stick to it. Yeah, that's true. I was, as you were speaking, I was thinking about my own writing, and I was thinking that that's how all my books were written. I started them and then I put them aside. Usually I do an outline, and then when I went back to it, I just wrote it. And if I didn't stick to it, it just didn't. You're right, it didn't happen at all. And then a question I like to ask authors is, do the books you read, because I think every author is a reader, do the books you read, um, do they influence your writing at all?
Definitely, definitely. I tend not to stick to the same genre. I don't only read thrillers because I write thrillers. I like to read outside of my genre as well.
Hmm.
I'm currently completing um, The Silent History by Donna Tartt. She wrote I forget the name of her Pulitzer Prize winning book, but you know, I, I I realized I wanted to read the book because of her language, of her absolute superb command of the language, her amazing descriptive powers, her completely vivid characters that just jump off the page. I mean, what a phenomenal book. Um, but it's a 600-page book. It's a tome, and it's taken me 3 months to read it because I got other things to do. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and I've learned so much. Not direct lessons, but sort of by osmosis, reading that kind of writing, see how she would approach a scene at the beginning of a chapter, for example. What little detail does she use? How does she describe that setting without sounding like it's a bullet pointed paragraph? That stuff is so valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And when you really like a style of a writer and you try to learn from it, I won't say copy it, but learn from it.
Yeah,
And for instance, what you were describing, the whole idea of a description, and then if you take a scene that you want to describe and you write it at first, you realize how you have to drill down and drill down and drill down again, 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 until you finally get really where this person came up with this phrase that just hit the spot. Yeah, it's interesting. I find that when I read now, whatever I read, I'm paying so much attention to the style of the writer,
yeah.
and I mean, I don't know if I would even say I would try to emulate it, but I just find it fascinating. So, so Jeff, we have about 2 minutes left, 2 or 3 minutes. What's in your writing future?
I have two books in work in process. Um, One is a book that I am going to pitch agents for because I'd like to get it traditionally published. Um, it is an ecological book, it's fiction, and I'm going to write it in the style of magical realism. and it's a genre that fascinates me. But I think so. It's definitely literary, and that's in process. The working title of that is the blue. Is it the blue west of autumn? Based
The-
on
Say it
American
again. The,
American Indian calendar.
the title. What is it?
Oh, the blue west of autumn.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
That's intriguing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then book number two of the Mindy and Pablo series, we find them both older, in their mid-teens, um, and looking forward to becoming young adults and new adults. And so we'll find them in a different space, more confident, more screwed up, more mature, more complicated book, which I'm looking forward to writing.
All right. It sounds like you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah,
And I like the fact that all of your books have a message.
they
There's
do.
always, and I think that's important. I think if we're going to take the time to write, we should write the message. So it's been a pleasure having you again.
Thank you
And
so much.
and I really, really enjoyed the book. I really did. I could not put it down. So, uh, and I have to say to you that I have an adult following on my book. People like 60s and 70s. They, I'm sorry, they uh, they love the book.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'd love it to appeal to a broad audience as possible. So we'll
Yeah.
see what I can
So
do.
so you have that audience. I'm going to email you something about writing reviews. Not that this is a new job for you, but I think we could do a trade-off on reviews, and that would be. I don't know how many reviews you have. I haven't looked at the book on Amazon yet. So
Yeah, I have very few. I
all
have
right.
some good I have some good editorial reviews from doctors and specialists and that sort of things.
Yeah.
But they don't post on Amazon. You know, they give
No,
me they
they
give me
used to.
they give me a nice
They,
blurb, but they don't post on Amazon. So I'm looking for those reviews.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so we'll be in touch, and thanks again for being on my show.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.